We can begin tonight's debate with opening statements. And on the coin toss, I'd like to turn to Mr. Cravaack for 2 minutes.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening. I'd like to thank Debate Minnesota for having us here as well, and Itasca Community College for sponsoring us. The first thing you need to know about me is I'm not a politician. I'm a retired Northwest Airlines pilot. I've been a union steward. I'm a retired Navy captain. And last couple years, I've had my most challenging endeavor, being a stay-at-home dad, taking care of 2 rambunctious boys that are 6 and they're 9 years old. And one of the things that I've really treasured through this last year is being a president of our local parent-teacher organization as well. But then I saw Congress undermine the future of our children and our grandchildren. I saw Congress bail out Wall Street. And then the wasted about $1 trillion worth of stimulus for jobs that were never really created, and put about a $862 billion debt upon our children and our grandchildren. I saw Congress come in, our government come in, and basically take over our health care bill, our health care plans as well. And then I saw them take over our student loans. And I knew I had to do something. About, oh gosh, a little over a year ago, I went to Congressman Oberstar's office in North Branch. There was quite a few of us there. And we spent over 2 hours trying to get a town hall meeting with our local congressman. But after 2 hours, we were told that the congressman was just too busy to meet with us. That was unacceptable to me, and that's how I got involved. Unfortunately, right now, our unemployment's been hovering about 10%. And Congressman Oberstar thinks that this has been a success with this stimulus bill. When again, we have spent over $862 billion in debt to our children and our grandchildren, and 3.3 million people have lost their jobs. I look forward to serving the people of the 8th District, and I thank you very much for being here, and I look forward for a spirited and respectful debate. Thank you.
Please. Please, thank you. Mr. Oberstar, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. I want to thank you and Bill both for being the moderators for tonight, and thank Debate Minnesota, including Roger Moe, the chairman of the board, and Blandon Foundation for supporting this initiative, and to all those who have come here tonight to participate by listening and evaluating us. And I want to welcome Captain Cravaack to the campaign. He's been out working very diligently throughout the past year. We have gone through the most severe economic recession since the Great Depression of the 1930s. We have seen the financial meltdown in the United States and abroad. It moved faster than the Great Depression moved. It wiped out $13 trillion of assets of residents of this country who are counting on that money for their retirement, counting on it for their investment in their current lifestyle. That economy, that meltdown of the economy was devastating. It started actually in December of 2007. The recession accelerated with great pace throughout 2008. I saw this coming. I moved a bill through my committee on transportation and infrastructure to put America back to work, building our roads and bridges and transit systems and our wastewater treatment and airport facilities that would use steel, American steel, that would help bring back the steel industry and the iron ore mining industry. We're down to less than 500 jobs in the iron ore mining industry, the taconite plants of the Iron Range. Railroads were down, the shipping on the Great Lakes was down. But President Bush said he'd veto that bill, even though we moved it through the House in September 2008, and then we had an election.
Jim?
President?
Time.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry. Let's go on to the first question. Bill?
Thank you, Patrick, and thanks to Debate Minnesota. It's a privilege to be here, and I hope everybody else feels the same, and I know the candidates do. I got a question on economic growth. and also spending in Washington. So it's a two-part question. It goes to Mr. Cravaack first. Do you believe the continuation of the tax cuts implemented during the George W. Bush administration, which expire in 2011 unless acted on by Congress, would help stimulate economic growth? If not, what federal initiative, if any, do you believe should be enacted to do so? Then the second part is, what government programs or agencies, if any, would you cut back or eliminate? Or what programs or agencies, again, if any, do you believe need increased federal dollars? Mr. Cravaack?
I think it was a travesty that Congress adjourned and not addressed the Bush tax cuts, because that left quite a bit of money on the table. But most of all, what it did is it told our businesses the instability of it all. And talking to people throughout the 8th District, business owners, that was one of the main things that they're just so afraid of, the uncertainty of what's going to happen from this administration next. We've seen the health care bill. We've seen the possibilities of cap and trade bill. We've seen how the stimulus plan has just definitely not worked. And now we're seeing these tax cuts that are looming over our heads. I was just in Gilbert, Minnesota just the other day. The War Wagon pulled in an RV center, and we spent the night there. And a guy named Leo hopped on board. He owns the place. And one of the big things that he just told me, he says, he put his arms up like this, and he said, I'm afraid. I don't know what to do with my business because I don't know whether to go left or whether to go right. I'm afraid to hire. I'm afraid to invest in my business because of the uncertainty of the business climate. In regards to the spending. The spending issue, I've actually survived this in the military. During the Clinton administration, we had what was called, remember the term right sizing? We had to right size our military. And what we did was a top-down, bottom-up review. It was bipartisan. What we did is got ourselves rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, if you can remember that terminology. I think what's good for the United States military would also be good for the federal government. We should do a top-down, bipartisan review to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse so that we can become more efficient and more effective.
Thank you, Mr. Cravaack. Mr. Oberstar?
Your question was about the Bush tax cuts and what government programs to reduce or cut. I propose that we keep in place, in fact, eliminate the subchapter S tax treatment for those small business corporations that are the generators of economic growth and innovation in our economy. That is one provision. It was subject to taxation. It received a reduction during the Bush tax cuts. I would propose to eliminate it. I would keep in place the restore, in fact, the top 2% of the income bracket who got 90+% of the tax cut during the President Bush years. That resulted in a $750 billion windfall for the top 2% of the income bracket. I think we should extend the tax cut that we provided in the stimulus for those earning under $250,000 and put more money in the pockets of people as we did during stimulus. I think that in addition, that we ought to examine, as President Obama has proposed to do and is in fact now doing with a government commission, to examine every federal government agency and determine whether those agencies can be reduced. I have consistently voted to reduce the funding on the manned spaceflight program while supporting the scientific endeavors in space. I think that saves us a considerable amount of money. I think that we should also reduce the military budget. It is 20% of the discretionary spending of the federal government. And I think that we'll come to this later, but reducing our presence in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Thank you, Mr. Oberstar. Mr. Cravaack, one minute back at you.
The last thing we need to do is increase taxes on Americans, including the S-corps. Even if those are eliminated, it's still going to put a tax on the rest of us. Average American earning in the middle income, $64,000, we're going to be taxed at an additional $1,500, and we're also going to have the marriage penalty. We'll have the child tax deduction also eliminated. We're going to have the death tax come in as well, and the AMT tax is going to snare about another 25 million of us. The last thing we need is increased taxes in a recessionary period. So the bottom line is we need to increase the, continue on with the Bush tax cuts so that we can rejuvenate business.
You got a few seconds left. Any government programs you would eliminate or pare back?
Real quickly, without getting too far into the weeds, one of the things that I like to take a look at is the Department of Energy. And the reason why I say that is it was under a Carter administration. Carter administration weakness on foreign oil went from 30% to 70% now. The nuclear power portion should go over to the Navy. I think we do that pretty well.
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. Oberstar.
I don't understand how Mr. Cravaack can say that if you eliminate the subchapter S taxes, that it increases taxes somewhere else. He wants to keep all the Bush tax cuts in place. That shifts the tax burden to the middle income Americans. That's the wrong policy. We need to restore tax equity and fairness for this country. Restore the pre-2001 tax structure. And reduce taxes on the middle class, which we have already done in the stimulus, and provide stimulus for the small businesses who are the generators of jobs and income in our society. And I think that is the appropriate approach to take for our tax policy.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question, Patrick.
Thank you. This will go first to Congress, or Mr. Oberstar. The American Recovery and Investment Act, also known as the stimulus bill. As Jim Houlihan noted earlier, the Blandin Foundation's Rural Plus puts jobs at as a pivotal issue in this election. And in principle, the Recovery and Reinvestment Act aims to stimulate jobs and business growth. In supporting the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, Mr. Oberstar, you have said that it has created and saved up to 2.4 million jobs since 2009. And moreover, in your position as chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, you have said that you are pushing ahead with a transportation bill that will create 174,000 jobs in Minnesota over the next 6 years without adding a dime to the deficit. Mr. Oberstar, could you tell us how and why your approach is best, and what, in your opinion, are the next most important steps Congress must take to stimulate recovery and investment? 2 minutes.
The stimulus program brought about investment in our highways and bridges, our transit systems, roadways. We have completed, in Minnesota, 535 lane miles of highway improved with the stimulus funding, 64 bridges reconstructed, rebuilt. Nationwide, that's 35,000 lane miles of highway improved, rebuilt, reconstructed, 1,264 bridges nationwide, 12,500 transit buses acquired by the nation's transit agencies, a good many of those in St. Cloud from New Flyer Corporation that almost doubled its employment. As a result of the stimulus, nearly 2 million tons of new steel have been poured. The cash for clunkers caused the production of coil steel that brought our steel industry back. And from what I said earlier, we had only less than 500 people working in the taconite plants in 2008. We're now up to full employment in those taconite plants and pouring steel, jobs in the iron ore pelletizing operations, jobs in the railroad to bring that ore to the Lakers in Duluth and Two Harbors, and shipping jobs in Lower Lake ports. So I think that the stimulus, that portion that is under my committees, created 23,000 construction jobs. Those are construction jobs in Minnesota, taconite jobs, and has also stimulated production in the transit industry. We need more of that kind of investment. The 6-year transportation bill will create 6 million jobs nationwide.
Thank you. Mr. Cravaack, on the assumption that the current approach is either insufficient or misdirected, tell us how and why you would re-redirect the economic recovery effort if you were elected. 2 minutes.
We got to remember that what we're talking about here, we are talking about the stimulus bill. And the stimulus bill, if you remember that President Obama, Speaker Pelosi, and Congressman Oberstar came out and they told us that we have to pass this bill now or else unemployment is going to skyrocket. They promised us that unemployment would remain below 8%. Well, that's a promise broken because currently our unemployment once again is around 10%. And we have spent basically $862 billion and added that to our deficit, which is going to our children and our grandchildren. And during that 18-month time period, we have lost 3.3 million jobs. Now, this is where Congressman Oberstar and I definitely differ. I believe it is the private sector that creates jobs. The private sector, business, small business, the people in the 8th District that I have been talking to, which is almost 3/4 are small businesses within the 8th District because we're a very rural community. And they employ about 2/3 of the fellow Minnesotans here as well. The private sector creates the revenue that goes into the government that pays for projects. That is how this works. When we have a stimulated a private sector, what happens is all that money goes into the government, and then we can fund all the infrastructure projects that we need. We definitely need infrastructure. We need safe roads. We need to have safe bridges, and we need to have an infrastructure to support public utilities. But it is the private sector growth that it actually spurs this growth. It is not government. So that is one of the main differences between Congressman Oberstar and myself.
Mr. Oberstar, 1 minute, as you wish.
Those are private sector jobs. Those are not government backhoes and bulldozers on construction sites or ready-mix trucks. Those are private sector ready-mix trucks. Those are workers in the construction sector who are performing the work. They work for, let's say, Knife River Construction Company, which did a major project on Interstate 35 between North Branch and Rush City. Was the year earlier doing 80% of its work in the private sector. That dried up because of the recession and the decline in private investment. By creating funding through the transportation sector, Knife River put its people back to work, reopened their gravel pits, had people on the jobs. They're paying taxes. In fact, nationwide, we accounted for $710 million in taxes paid by workers on construction jobs. Those are the private sector jobs. And that 8% was not a promise, that was a goal. It didn't reach that goal because the recession was so deep.
Mr. Cravaack, 1 minute.
And again, I disagree. It was a promise from President Obama in regards to keeping unemployment below 8%. And again, it is the private sector that creates the revenue. The revenue goes to government. Government then distributes that revenue back into the public. But again, it is us that creates those revenue that goes to the government, that goes to that private sector. Without the private sector, the government would wither up and die. Without the government, we'd probably have a booming economy. No, just kidding. But it is, once again, it is the private sector that actually generates the revenue that goes to the government. And I think we've understood that.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question. I could be wrong, but I got a hunch you guys are going to differ on this one. Very simple. Healthcare reform. And it goes to Mr. Oberstar first. Continue to implement it or repeal it?
We passed the most sweeping health insurance reform bill in the history of the country. I supported it. I worked very hard to ensure that two principles that I care deeply about were included in that bill. One, that the reimbursement formula under Medicare would be adjusted to compensate our northern tier hospitals so that they would not fall further behind. We made that commitment. We achieved that goal. There will be $400 million paid in incremental adjustments that will make it clear that our northern tier hospitals like St. Mary's, St. Luke's, Millard Dwan, Cuyuna Lakes, and others will receive the same reimbursement as those in southern tier states. And secondly, that no funding for abortion is in this bill. Title 29 U.S. Code, that's the health care section of the U.S. Code, Public Law 9686, signed October 12, 1979, includes the Hyde Amendment, of which I was the co-author. And that has applied since 1979. That's 31 years. It governs the funding of community health centers. None of the funds appropriated under this act and under this title may be used to perform abortions except to save the life of the mother or in the case of rape or incest. That is public law. And secondly, in the health exchanges, there is language that makes it, that puts a wall of separation between federally funded health exchanges and those that are privately funded. So none of the public funds can be used for abortion.
Thank you, Mr. Oberstar. Mr. Cravaack, 2 minutes, please.
Yes, remember President Obama came out and said that if you like your health care provider, you can keep them. If you like your doctor, you'll be able to keep them. Well, 87 million Americans will not be able to keep their current health care plans. This bill is a 2,700-page document that was rammed down our throats the majority of Americans did not want. And what did we get in return? What we've received is increased costs in our businesses and a loss of jobs. This can be demonstrated right down by Medtronic. Medtronic has directly attributed this health care bill to $200 million loss, and they said they can possibly lose up to 1,000 employees. In addition to that, it is going to increase the majority of Americans' taxes as well to pay for this health care bill, and it's going to harm our seniors. Starting January 1st, reimbursement for Medicare is going to decrease by 21.5% to our Medicare docs. Our doctors are already saying now that they can't afford to take on any Medicare patients. And they're also even considering if they'll be able to keep the ones that they have. In addition to that, they're taking over $500 billion out of the Advantage program to basically support Medicare, or support this health care bill. In addition to that, it is going to put a bureaucrat between us and our doctors. The doctors that I've been speaking with have already said that they are going to start feeling like basically federal employees, because the federal government is going to be mandating what type of care that our doctors are going to be able to practice. This is not the type of medicine that we want here in the United States. We have something better right here. Does it have warts? Yes. Can we get better? Absolutely. And hopefully in the next part of the question I'll be able to answer that. Thank you.
Mr. Oberstar, a minute. And I'm wondering if you could, I know you want to continue the implementation of the bill. You're very proud of your vote on it. Is there anything you would change in it?
I don't think there is much to change. I think we will, I've gone through the bill section by section at least 3 times. And I think it's a work in progress. We will make adjustments to it in time to come. But the 87 million people, that's a fictitious number. You do keep your own health plan. You negotiate that in the health exchanges. And every American citizen will have the same health care plan as federal government employees, including members of Congress. And the plan will save $750 billion over 10 years, according to the government Congressional Budget Office, and $1 trillion over 20 years. There is no government bureaucrat coming between you, your doctor, or your health insurance plan. There are health insurance company bureaucrats now that stand between you and your health care.
Thank you, Mr. Oberstar. Mr. Cravaack, is there, from a healthcare standpoint, what would you like to see as far as healthcare reform?
Good question, and let me address that in just one second. First thing, let's talk about abortion. I really don't even have to fight this issue. Minnesota Citizens Concern for Life and the National Right for Life Committee has already said that this is the worst legislation since Roe versus Wade. In regard for the 87 million, the 87 million actually came from the White House, reported by the Associated Press as well, and I can give you that document, sir, if you'd like. And regarding to what we would like to keep, I mean, there are some actually good aspects of this health care bill, but it's so layered and ingrained so far deep into the core of this health care bill, we would have to repeal it and start all over again. But one of the things, for example, is having insurance companies drop you after you become ill. That is just not right. So that's one thing that I think that we could definitely take a look at, is making sure that that could be incorporated. We can do better. We can work on it together.
Gentlemen, thank you. Patrick?
Thank you. And before we turn to the next issue, I'd just like to point out to you that the volunteers are still circulating cards for you to fill out if you have a question as we turn to that next portion. But the issue that we will take up right now, and the first question will be directed to Congressman Mr. Oberstar, and it's foreign policy. 2 years ago, in a similar debate, here in Grand Rapids, foreign policy, particularly the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, were front and center. Those nations, that war or those wars continue to be in the headlines, but are almost invisible in the current political campaigns. Point out, for example, that neither of you specifically address either war on your websites. Yet the cost to the United States in lives and national treasure continues, contributing hugely to the national debt. Each war represents a symptom, of the cancer of terrorism, a threat that continues to shadow and redefine who we are and what we are as a nation. The question for 2 minutes to each of you, but first, Mr. Oberstar, is there a cure for the cancer of terrorism? Or is it something that we must learn to live with, and if so, at what price?
European countries have been living with terrorism for many years, and they have not found an easy answer to it. We are a much bigger target than the European community. Russia similarly has lived with terrorism in various parts of the country, but particularly in Chechnya. We should have, as President Bush started to do, attack Afghanistan and go after Al-Qaeda and find, as he said, find and kill Osama bin Laden. But too soon, attention was turned from Afghanistan to Iraq. Now, I voted against entry into the Gulf War I. I voted against entry into Gulf War II in Iraq. I think it was the wrong decision to make. I think that was the wrong policy to pursue. There was no need for us to make that military intervention. And I think that had we rather concentrated our efforts on Afghanistan, we would have gotten to the root of the Osama bin Laden terrorist organization. As it is, I think the President now is on somewhat the right track on drawing down our forces and making a commitment. Now, in the earlier discussion that we had, Mr. Cravaack said we shouldn't have deadlines. If we don't have deadlines, we don't meet them. We don't achieve goals. We need to set a deadline. We need to get our troops out of Iraq, as we're doing now, drawing them down. We need to draw those troops down out of Afghanistan on the schedule the President set forth. I voted to impose a schedule on the President, require him to come up with a specific plan, and that hasn't been done yet. We should also, in interest of saving billions of dollars, bring our troops out of Japan and out of Formosa and out of Europe.
Mr. Cravaack, 2 minutes, please.
I think we're on the right road in Iraq right now. I think we're on track. I think we've pulled out our combat forces. They are now supplementing the Iraqi forces, except for some special combat units that are still in place. We've invested a lot of blood and treasure in Iraq, and we need to see it through just for that for that alone. In regards to Afghanistan, you have to remember that the 9/11 Bipartisan Commission stated that we are at war with Islamic fundamentalists. And right now, that war is in Afghanistan. That is where the enemy is. And I actually agree with President Obama. I agreed that with his troop surge. I was a little disappointed that it took him so long to get to that position, but in fact, we're there, we're moving in the right direction, and I'm very happy with that. I am a little disappointed in the aspect that he has capped the amount of troops that are able to go to Afghanistan. I think that our commanders on the ground should be able to make those decisions as they implement the policy of the United States. I'm also disappointed in having a timeline broadcasted to the enemy telling them that we are going to leave in July of 2011. If I'm a Taliban, I'm going to hold up in my cave, I'm going to recreate my supply lines, I'm going to rearm, I'm going to train, and then as soon as the last helicopter lifts off the field in Afghanistan, that is when I'm going to strike. It is absolutely imperative that we have a stable Afghanistan. And I'm sure General Petraeus and President Karzai will be working very closely together to ensure that occurs. Because if we have an unstable Afghanistan, their next door neighbor, Pakistan, may also feel some of that instability. And the last thing that we need is Pakistan to go unstable, because obviously they have a nuclear arsenal, and none of us want to see a terrorist with nuclear weapons.
Congressman Oberstar, or Mr. Oberstar, 1 minute, please.
Again, I come back to my point that in Afghanistan we are engaged in what we are doing also in the previous Bush administration with nation building in Iraq. President Bush wisely said in his campaign for president that in 2000 that he did not want the United States to be engaged in nation building. It's risky, it's difficult to get out of. He was right on all counts, but then he got mired down in that approach. Afghanistan is a conglomeration of tribal governance of which we know very little and with whom we have very little understanding. I think we need to draw our forces down by the timeline that the President has set forth. I think it's the right approach to do. I would like to see it more specific. But we also have to bring our troops and materiel out of Iraq.
Again, I'd like to address the 9/11 Commission, the bipartisan commission that states that we are at war, use term, war, with Islamic fundamentalists. And again, we should not be pulling out of Afghanistan until we achieve victory in that war. Again, one of the most important aspects of stabilizing Afghanistan is because of Pakistan, right next door. We've already seen the beginnings of this infiltration of Taliban operatives going into Pakistan and disrupting the Pakistan government. This is the last thing we as Americans need. We cannot have Islamic fundamentalists have a nuclear device. Talking about living in fear for the rest of our lives, that is what that will occur. That's why we need to have a stable Afghanistan. We don't come home until the job is done. And talking to the troops, they don't want to come home till their job is done either.
Thank you. We will now be shifting to the second segment of tonight's debate, and that will be audience questions that you've been coming through, and we've got a good file to start with. And I'll just remind you, if you have a question, ask one of the volunteers for a card. Be sure to write as legibly as you can, and try and direct your questions as best you can to both candidates so that each can respond. And Bill, first question.
Thank you. And gentlemen, please keep, it's 1 minute each, so I know that's kind of a lightning round, but do the best you can, please. Mr. Cravaack, this goes to you first. Since both candidates are pro-life, what is your rationale for opposing stem cell research when utilizing cells that would otherwise be thrown away could help millions afflicted with diseases and to live a better life?
That's a very good question. And the bottom line is, with stem cell research, they have found that adult stem cells are actually much better than using stem cells from infants, so embryonic stem cell. So I'm saying, why do we have to split hairs here when actually adult stem cell research has proven to be much more viable of an avenue to go? So why do we need to even discuss the issue when adult stem cell research proves to be a better choice?
Mr. Oberstar?
I have supported the right to life of the unborn from my very first campaign for Congress in 1974. It remains a core value with me. Life begins at conception, and I cannot justify to myself, I cannot justify it morally or in any other fashion to take the life of that developing human being. So I have consistently opposed embryonic stem cell research. The science truly is still not developed on that subject of embryonic stem cell research, but there is promising work done with adult stem cells, and there is still a great deal of work to be accomplished in that arena. I think we should respect life and not pursue embryonic stem cells.
We agree.
Thank you, gentlemen. This question, Mr. Oberstar first. In 1 minute, how do you think Social Security should be fixed?
Social Security is the most successful social endeavor in the history of this country and probably the history of the world. Every year, in fact, last year, it paid out $747 billion in benefits to 53 million Americans, lifted 13 million seniors out of poverty. Social Security depends, however, on a growing economy. We need to make sure that our economy is stimulated, that it is productive, that there are jobs created out into the future, and we need to stay on that course. We were on that course during the Clinton administration. President Clinton left office with a $236 billion budget surplus, with a national debt down that would have been down to zero in this year if we'd stayed on that course. We need to come back to that approach and stabilize and strengthen our national economy and strengthen Social Security.
Thank you. Mr. Cravaack?
We definitely need to keep the promises that we made to our seniors. That is something that we have to do. My dad is 79 years old, and the last thing that I want to do is mess with Social Security because he is counting on it. He's worked hard all of his life. He was a salesman, and he was gone a lot of times before I got up in the morning, and he was gone by the time I went to bed. He deserves everything that he has worked for, and I will always do to protect Social Security. Social Security, 50 million Americans depend on Social Security. A lot of them are, some of them are widows and those that are disabled. The things that we can do to enforce Social Security, and we can do it by making sure that the money that is allotted to Social Security stays in Social Security. That is one of the main things that we can do. We can do it by definitely having a robust economy. We do not have to privatize Social Security. We do not have to decrease benefits. We do not have to increase the age limits requirements. And though we do not have to increase taxes.
Mr. Cravaack, to you, a question from a resident of White Lakes. Would you be in favor of using federal funds for private schools and also making English our national language? 1 minute.
Federal government into private schools. I think private schools want to remain private basically because of the tentacles that come in from Washington, D.C. That is one of the main things. Schools need to be stay basically in charge at a local level. We as parents need to be empowered of our local schools. Teachers need to be allowed to teach in our local schools. I've been a parent-teacher organization president for the last couple of years, and one of the main things that I'm seeing from teachers is that Washington, D.C. is controlling their classroom. They open up their calendars and they're saying, look at all these lines. These are mandated teaching requirements from Washington, D.C. We need a less Washington, D.C. in our classrooms, and we need more teachers that can teach, and parents that want to be empowered, and school boards that are involved.
Mr. Oberstar, 1 minute.
Was it funds to private schools?
Private schools
Yes, I thought,
and
yeah.
English as a national language.
I don't think we need to make English a national language. I don't think that makes any sense at all. But I don't feel that federal funds should go directly to private schools either. Private schools have the right to establish a school, to source the funding from whatever origins they choose, but public funds for public purpose. And the public schools have been the great integrator in our society. They've been very successful in bringing people of many nations, nationalities, and languages together in the great melting pot that is America, and investing in our, whether it's local funds or state or federal funds in public schools is right, not into private schools.
Thank you, gentlemen. This question, Mr. Oberstar first. What is your stance on logging in national forests?
Logging in national forests. I have strongly supported a vigorous logging industry and logging in our Superior National Forest and Chippewa National Forest, and have worked vigorously with the loggers associations and the wood fiber industry throughout Minnesota in my years in Congress to support a vigorous logging industry. It is a renewable resource. You cut the trees, they grow back. I've been out on many a logging site, such as with the Maturi family in Chisholm, where Art Maturi Jr. is now, or was a couple years ago, logging a plot that his grandfather had logged 40 or 50 years earlier. The forest renews itself, and these are renewable jobs. I support a vigorous logging industry and have worked with the U.S. Forest Service on both of our national forests and our loggers associations on those issues.
Mr. Cravaack,
We most definitely need to be logging in our national forests for sheer, if safety, if nothing else. Otherwise, we are going to go into the situation that Colorado just recently found themselves in. They had to import our loggers from Minnesota to go to Colorado to start harvesting some of the dead wood that was through the forest as well. We need to do the same thing with our national forests, and unfortunately, we're not even reaching the quotas that have been placed out in our logging industry. We need to be able to fully embrace our logging industry. That is our heritage up in this district as well, and we can do better by lowering the restrictions, reasonable restrictions, to get our loggers back in the woods and to harvest nothing else, the dead wood that is on the ground to keep our forests, natural resources safe.
Thank you. Just to remind you, we're still circulating cards, and please fill them out, and we'll do our best to get to them. Mr. Cravaack, first to you, 1 minute. Would you, this comes from Grand Rapids, would you support laws that prevent corporations from establishing phony headquarters offshore to avoid paying U.S. taxes?
Well, the big thing here is, are they breaking a law? If they are breaking a law, by all means, let's make sure that we make them definitely culpable for what the laws they were breaking. If they are not breaking any laws, I don't see how we can enforce laws that they're not breaking. But the question, I guess, would be, would I put a law up? You know, this underscores a bigger problem. Why are corporations going offshore to do business? Why don't we have a business-rich environment within the United States so we can bring business into the United States and create a business-rich environment? So if people are going offshore and trying to evade our taxes or our restrictions and regulations, that's the true problem. That's where the spotlight needs to be, so we can create a business-rich environment here in the United States to keep companies here in the United States and create this great thing called jobs.
Mr. Oberstar, 1 minute.
Well, the question was keeping companies from establishing phony headquarters offshore. There is no justification for a company establishing a a sham entity offshore just so that it can evade U.S. taxes. But corporations go offshore for other reasons than to evade U.S. taxes. They go for lower pay, for no benefits to the workers, no retirement, no occupational safety and health protections in the plant. They go for example, just today, the International Trade Commission ruled in favor of the petition of the United Steelworkers on which I testified that Indonesia and other countries are subsidizing their exports of paper to the United States, printed paper, coated paper. That is wrong. We should, and we've taken the action by the ITC today to protect American jobs.
Thank you, gentlemen. This question, Mr. Oberstar first, 1 minute. Construction jobs are good, but they're short-lived. Where are the long-term, good-paying jobs that build communities and stable families?
Construction jobs are not short-lived. They are, Knife River completes the job between North Branch and Rush City. The road construction company that restored and repainted the bridge in Duluth, they completed that project. They went on to do another one after that. That is the nature of construction. You go from project to project. If you're an operating engineer driving a truck or a backhoe or an overhead crane, that's your work. You go where the work is. And that's how the Associated General Contractors operate. They go where the work is. But the private sector work of the Associated General Contractors dried up in the recession. And they have now been doing work in the public sector. Those public sector funds are creating jobs, people are paying taxes, they're avoiding unemployment compensation, and we're getting long-term permanent benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Oberstar. Mr. Cravaack, for a minute.
Again, the long-term business opportunities within the 8th District, a lot of it goes to small businesses. The last thing we need to do is increase taxes on our small businesses. A lot of our businesses take their small businesses take their business income as normal income. The last thing we need to do is tax those businesses, because those small businesses, they're the lifeblood of the 8th District. And traveling the 8th District, we're talking to all kinds of business owners, from Leo at the RV park to a lady that had a tanning salon in Duluth. One of the main things that she talked, right off the bat, she came up to me and she goes, the health care bill is taxing me to a point. I have 15 employees. I don't know what to do. I don't know how I'm going to keep the doors open. I'm probably going to have to lay off people, or because of the regulations and restrictions, they're saying it's too much to do business here in the 8th District. That is what I'm hearing from business owners in the 8th District. Let's lower the taxes on our business folks. Let's get rid of some of the restrictions. Of course, it has to be a common sense type of situation, but lowering the restrictions on our businesses as well.
Mr. Cravaack, this comes from Warburton, Minnesota. 1 minute, please. Please comment on the role of the federal government with respect to E12 education.
The best thing for the federal government between E12 education is to stay out of our classrooms. That is the prime reason, one of the things that I've seen all the time, and listening to the teachers. I've been talking to principals. I've been going around speaking to superintendents throughout the 8th District. The most important thing we do as parents is educate our children. My mom, unfortunately, never completed high school because she had to go back and take care of the 7 children that she was one of the oldest daughters of. The most important thing for her, for me, was education and becoming an educated person. What I see as a parent-teacher organization president, talking to teachers, talking to principals, they say, keep the federal government out of our classroom. Teachers saying, just let us teach. We're doing this because we love it. And so the best thing we do is let teachers teach in the classroom, and having local control in our school boards, and again, parent involvement.
Mr. Oberstar, 1 minute.
I just want to say that small business person Mr. Cravaack referenced that said government is taxing me on health care gets a 35% tax credit under the bill that we passed, going up to 50% tax credit. Education is a foundation of our Northland. The early settlers invested in education systems, the best that there are in the state and in the nation here in the Northland. the federal government has a role to play. It's a partnership role to play with local school districts. It should fund innovative initiatives in education. It should support local initiatives. But the No Child Left Behind of President Bush was a good idea to raise standards and have accountability through testing of progress made annually. There are changes that have to be made in the No Child Left Behind to make it workable, and we can do those things. But the role of the federal government is a partnership role.
Thank you, gentlemen. This question is 1 minute each for Mr. Oberstar first, from a gentleman from Nisswa. How can it be said that the stimulus gave the middle class a tax break while letting the Bush tax cuts expire, which would raise all tax brackets?
Well, the Bush tax cuts have not yet expired, but they will at the end of the year. We did give everybody in the stimulus a $400 per individual and $800 per couple reduction in taxes. That was $300 billion. That was nearly half of the stimulus. And just before adjournment, we passed the change in the estate tax so that all persons under $3.5 million will not be subject to the estate tax. That will leave in place only 7,600 estates in the country, in the entire country, that would be subject to estate tax. So the tax cut was beneficial. It put money in the pockets of people to spend. And in addition to that, we increased the benefit for Social Security, $250, because there was no COLA.
Thank you, Mr. Oberstar. Mr. Cravaack?
Again, one of the last things that we could possibly do is not continue the Bush tax cuts. In regards to taxing the majority of Americans, the lowest actual tax brackets get hit the hardest. So that is one of the main things that we need to do, is we need to continue on the tax cuts. Voting to adjourn, even though 39 Democrats wanted to continue on with the process and all the Republican caucus wanted to continue on the process, puts our businesses in a holding pattern. They are not going to purchase products. They are not going to hire employees. And quite frankly, there has been some speculation that even if Congress returns when it returns, that there's not going to be enough time to pull back some of those reins. So the best thing that we can do to create a true, vibrant economics platform for our businesses is to continue on with those Bush tax cuts.
Thank you. Mr. Cravaack, directed to you from Grand Rapids. What about veterans' benefits, particularly as it relates to health care, suicides, war fatigue, and so on? Specifically, what's missing, what's needed?
Being a veteran, I guess I'm a little skewed with this. We must always take care of our veterans. It is a promise, not only our veterans, but our veterans' families as well. This is something that we must do. We must care for our veterans in all capacities when they come out. They were ready to give their all for us. We must give their all from them when they come home. One of the best things we can give a vet when they're coming home is a job. The best thing we can do that is having a vibrant economic society as well. That is one of the best things we should do. A lot of our vets are one of the increasing numbers of homeless here in the United States. The best thing we can do is give them dignity upon their return and take care of them as well. And Congressman Oberstar and I will disagree on this as well. I think that the best thing one vet could do is talk to another vet. I think the DOD should be back in charge of the Veterans Administration.
Mr. Oberstar, 1 minute.
Our veterans were asked by their country to put themselves in harm's way, to expose themselves to danger and risk their lives. We owe it to them. We must never back down on that commitment to our veterans who've carried us through all the wars of our nation's long history. And I have supported the needs and the rights of veterans, including voting in this Congress for the biggest increase in funding of the Veterans Administration in its history. $98 billion Veterans Administration budget. What's needed is to make some adjustments in the transition from the war front to the civilian front. Men are being discharged from the Army with 10% disability, given 100% disability by the Veterans Administration without any of the benefits they would have had with 100% Army disability. We're going to fix that.
Gentlemen, thank you. This question, again, 1 minute each, goes to Mr. Oberstar first. Kind of an ongoing question regarding rural Minnesota and its economy from a gentleman in International Falls. All but 2 counties of the 8th district are far below the state average household income. My county, Cravaack, is $18,180 below the state average income. How do you change it? Mr. Oberstar, I'm sorry. Mr. Oberstar first.
I have consistently supported local initiatives. There are economic development organizations in every county in my district. I have worked with all of them on their ideas of how they can turn their economy around. In Cravaack County, wood fiber is a critical sector. I worked in the previous Congress to establish tax credit for black liquor produced by Boise Cascade that saved them tens of millions of dollars and kept that company in the black and operating during this extremely difficult economic downturn. That has kept jobs in the plant, jobs in the woods, providing wood fiber to the falls. I've worked on the Border Patrol. I've worked on Voyageurs National Park, the travel and tourism sector. This is a partnership. I work with the local communities on their ideas and their initiatives and take them out into the real world.
Thank you. Mr. Cravaack?
The saying is one of the chief exports we have in the 8th district is our children, because they cannot find employment within the 8th district. Cravaack County, as you mentioned, loses 1 person every 72 hours. And the reason why that is there's no employment. People are looking elsewhere for jobs. The best thing we can do to revigorate the 8th district is the small business owner. Once again, that is the employment engine within the 8th district. They employ 2/3 of us in the 8th district. So by lowering the taxation that I see, that I'm hearing from business owners from the 8th district, lowering the taxes so business owners can reinvest in themselves. When they invest in themselves, they hire employees. Employees then have money in their pockets. They go out and they purchase things, which creates more of a demand. And there is an upward spiral instead of having more taxes taken away from us, where you start a downward spiral.
So, Mr. Cravaack, why wasn't, this comes from Hibbing, why wasn't more done and sooner about the BP oil spill that recently happened? And what's the truth about what's going on with respect to BP today?
In regards to the BP oil spill, immediately after the BP oil spill, we had other countries come in and willingly give us their skimmers. They were rejected. The governor of Louisiana was out there with 16 skimmers trying to protect the shoreline. They were shut down. That is the reality of what's happened in the 8th district. Congressman Oberstar is the chairman of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. He is in charge of oil spills and protecting our shorelines. He's in charge of the Coast Guard as well. What we should have done is, you know, it's kind of like having your house on fire, but a fire truck going by is Canadian, so we're not going to use it. That's exactly what happened with the BP oil spill. Instead of letting foreign countries have their skimmers immediately on station, being able to take in that oil, we didn't allow them to do that. That's one of the main problems with that BP oil spill right off the bat.
Mr. Oberstar?
What was wrong with the BP oil spill was that in May of 2008, the Bush administration allowed British Petroleum to excused British Petroleum from filing a response plan for an oil spill. Excused them. They did not have to plan for it. They did not have to describe how they would deal with something at 5,000 feet below the ocean surface going down to 18,000 feet below the mud line. That was the first problem. The second was there was no technology capability within the Minerals Management Service to manage the failure. We were entirely dependent on BP. The response, there were thousands of vessels engaged in cleanup, and those that came from other countries first had to be validated by the Coast Guard that they could do this job. They were then certified.
Thank you. This question, again, 1 minute each. Mr. Oberstar first. Do you believe we need another stimulus bill?
I believe we need the 6-year Surface Transportation Authorization Bill. That will assure continuity for work on our highways and bridges and transit systems and restoring the state of good repair of our surface transportation systems. That 35,000 lane miles of highway that have been improved, including 535 miles of highway here in the state of Minnesota, and of that, $136 million was spent in the 8th District on highway projects. It represents only 4% of the need of this country. A long-term surface transportation investment bill that will simplify the process, expedite projects, expedite the permitting, put people to work long-term, make the investments we need to clean up congestion, and connect rural and urban America with access roads is the investment that we need for the future of America.
Thank you. Mr. Cravaack?
No.
Would you like to elaborate?
No. I think I've been clear before.
Fair enough.
We'll turn to the next question. Mr. Cravaack, we'll start with you for a minute. This comes from Deer River. Please discuss with us your opinion of how the proposed Clean Water Act will affect us in the 8th District.
The Clean Water Act, Congressman Oberstar has a current bill out. It's called the America's Commitment to Clean Water Act. What it's going to do is actually federalize all waters of the United States up to including a seasonal slough or even including a wet meadow. This will put a layer of restrictions and regulations coming from the federal government. This is actually the Clean Water Restoration Act, which was Congressman Oberstar's previous bill, was shot down twice by the Supreme Court. It was under the Rapanos Agreement and the Swank decision and the Rapanos Agreement or decision, stating that it was a huge overreach of the federal government, quite frankly, against the 10th Amendment. The Clean Water Restoration Act, now the Aqua Bill, is something that we absolutely do not need in the United States, and it is an overreach by the federal government. Probably one of the biggest land grabs that ever occurred.
Mr. Oberstar.
The Clean Water Restoration Act will not, America's commitment to clean water, will not federalize. It will not change existing structure. What it will do is reestablish the Clean Water Act as it existed prior to the Swank and Rapanos decisions of 2001, in which the Supreme Court misinterpreted the act. I know I wrote the legislation, and I was part of writing the Clean Water Act of 1972. It does not federalize waters, as was described just a moment ago by Mr. Cravaack. This is legislation aimed at controlling pollution of our lands and waters. And the Supreme Court did not say that Congress did not have the authority to do that. They did not say that it was that the bill cannot deal with navigable waters. They didn't agree on what navigable means. They did not write a clear decision. We need to clarify it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question, Mr. Oberstar first. Our national debt is soaring. Do you believe federal spending can continue at the current rate?
The federal debt soaring out of control. Remember, in January 2001, when President Bush took office, we had a budget surplus of $236 billion, a national debt of $5.7 trillion. We were on course, if we kept the same policies in place, to to be at zero debt held by public in this year. Instead, President Bush went ahead with tax cuts that reduced taxes for the top 2%, $750 billion. That's what they did, that's what they passed, and that put us into, frankly, into this recession that we're in today. The goal of taxation should be, tax policy should be to close the gap between the richest and the poor. It's never been so wide since, including the Great Depression. And we need to restore tax fairness in this country.
Thank you. Mr. Cravaack?
When you asked me that question, I immediately thought of a guy digging a hole, and if you want to stop going deeper, you stop digging. The last thing we need to do is stop our spending. We have to stop our spending before we can get this debt under control. That's the bottom line. We cannot continue on this unsustainable debt that we keep on placing on our children and our grandchildren. Our children will become indentured servants to the United States government unless we curb our spending now and we start alleviating this debt. We have to be able to separate our wants from our needs, and we must live within our means. I'm tired of Congress telling me that I have to be fiscally responsible when they continue a broken bureaucratic model that does nothing more than add to the federal deficit. Congress needs to live within its means. Congress needs to maintain a balanced budget. And if you send me to Congress, that's what I intend to do.
Mr. Cravaack, lots of good questions. We're coming near the end, so if you have some final questions that you'd like to submit, please do so at this time. To you for 1 minute from Grand Rapids. Mr. Cravaack, besides stimulating jobs, how can we stimulate graduation rates in high school so that more young people from poor young people can attend and succeed in college?
I'm a blue and gold officer from the United States Naval Academy, and I see a lot of high school kids going off to college. The best thing we can do for our children right now, and I'll go back to a previous, what we've talked about, was to get parents involved in their child's education. Allowing teachers to be teachers. Because the teachers that as a parent-teacher organization president, our teachers love to teach. But unfortunately, they're hampered in too many ways through the federal government getting involved in our classroom. There's absolutely nothing that the federal government is going to tell us about what is going on in our local schools. We know, or we should know. So the best thing we can do to get kids to go to the Naval Academy, to go to good colleges, is give them a good, solid education, get them great SATs, and the doors will open up wide, and they will have a great opportunity.
Mr. Oberstar, 1 minute, please.
For 36 years, I've been nominating promising young men and women to our military academies, and very proud of the accomplishments that they have achieved during their academy years and subsequently. We have gifted, talented young people all throughout this great 8th Congressional District. I'm proud to nominate them. And where there are great successes, it's where parents are engaged with their children's education. My parents were engaged with me, and those of my classmates. And because of that, for 40 or 50 years at Chisholm High School, every graduating class had someone who went on to be a doctor, an engineer, an attorney, and scores of teachers. Parent engagement. But we need to have a partnership and support and provide funding for those school districts that lack the financial means to sustain high-quality education.
Gentlemen, this question for Mr. Oberstar first. 1 minute. Would you support public financing for all political campaigns?
Public financing for all political campaigns. In fact, I voted for that several times over years, 3 times. We had the opportunity to do that. Struck down by the Supreme Court for various reasons, provisions within the law. I think equalizing the spending and taking the special interests out of the campaign stream is a valid and necessary objective. But that's not the whole issue. We're seeing in this national election the results of the Supreme Court decision that said money is speech, that corporations can gather up revenue from their domestic and foreign sources, as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is doing, and spending hundreds of millions of dollars in this campaign, not accounting for it, not attributing their revenues. Mr. Cravaack and I both have to list where our money comes from. Those organizations aren't doing that. They aren't required to do that, and that's wrong. We ought to keep that outside money out.
Thank you. Mr. Cravaack.
I would love to see a level playing field, especially on this David and Goliath story we've got going on right here. But like Congressman Oberstar said, it was struck down by the Supreme Court. But there's a lot of power in the grassroots effort as well. I mean, our organization pretty much is completely funded within the 8th District, and we have seen great headway in fighting back as best we can with the limited resources that we have available. And so there is ways of doing it. We just have to be very smart on how we use our meager resources in engaging in this operation. But special interest groups, in our campaign, we just don't really have any. But we just have a lot of money from a lot of great people out there, and we thank them for all their hard work and efforts. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Excuse me, Mr. Cravaack. This comes from the city of Duluth. How do you think we should pay and provide health care for the uninsured? Please be as specific as you can. 1 minute.
Pay and provide health care for the uninsured. I think the uninsured should pay and provide their own health care. You know, there's no real free lunch. I mean, for those that can pay for their own health care, then they should go ahead and do it. Just because they're uninsured doesn't mean that we have to pay for their health care. I don't know if the question might have been written for somebody who can't afford health care, but as the question is written, people that are uninsured should pay for their own health care.
Please, please, please. Congressman Oberstar, or Mr. Oberstar.
We ought to have health care available for all Americans. It's been my position since my first campaign in 1974. We ought to have a national health insurance program. We ought to have a single payer system. But there are some people who become uninsured through no fault of their own, as in the case of the Cloquet family, who has a child with a birth defect. They had a very good insurance policy, and then one day the insurance company said, sorry, you've reached your limit. No more coverage. That child is uninsured. That child's life is at risk and at stake. If they can't get Medicaid, and they couldn't, then what happens? You're going to leave that child die? That's not a right-to-life position. That is crass and unconcerned. I think that the health insurance reform that we've passed will cover those gaps and make sure that people are never capped and never lose their insurance and never denied access to insurance.
Thank you. This question goes to Mr. Oberstar first. Entitlement and debt are 62% of the budget. All other spending is called discretionary, including the military. How do we control entitlement spending?
Entitlement spending is defined differently by different organizations, but Social Security is an entitlement. Medicare is an entitlement. Veterans benefits are an entitlement. We're not going to cut Social Security, although Mr. Cravaack on Monday said everything's on the table in dealing with the needs of Social Security, and that means cuts in my language. We have 20% of our budget, discretionary budget, is the military spending, and about 15% is civilian discretionary spending. And within those arenas, we can find areas to cut, and we'll follow the work of the President's Commission to do that. And as we did in 1993, we passed our reconciliation bill. We cut 400 government programs. We can do it again.
Thank you. Mr. Cravaack.
And just a small rebuttal, Congressman Oberstar, when I said everything's on the table, that means we do not have to privatize our Social Security. We do not have to lower benefits. We do not have to increase age, and we do not have to increase taxes. Those are the things that are on the table. So Now, I'm perfectly clear there. I hope we understand that. In regards to the entitlement, again, and the debt, one of the things that we need to do is, remember I said we need to do a top-down, bottom-up review. This is something that would be under that purview. We need to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, just like we did in the military, where we got very lean. I think the federal government can make the military do that. I think the federal government should be taking its own medicine as well.
Thank you. Well, we've reached the near, or as a pilot might say, we're coming in for a landing, and that landing will be
Tray tables up, please.
Right. We'll be coming in now, and for the closing statements, and I believe Mr. Cravaack is first to go, and you have up to 2 minutes to make your final remarks.
Well, I thank everyone for coming here this evening. It is a Friday night. It is a beautiful Friday night, and we appreciate you coming to share it with us. We have seen here this evening some pretty stark differences between Congressman Oberstar and myself, but now it's time for you to choose. The bottom line for me, and I will not be long-winded in this aspect, I'd be very humbled to receive your vote. I will work very hard for the men and women of the 8th District, and it would be a privilege to serve, and I look forward to serving you. Thank you.
Just a moment. Congressman Oberstar, 2 minutes.
We are defined by faith, family, and work. Those are the values that I grew up learning in my family in Chisholm. And they are the values that guided my public service. It has been a great honor and privilege, greatest of my life, the greatest that I think anyone can have, to be chosen by the people of the 8th District to serve their needs, respond to their concerns. I've worked very hard to earn your trust and your support over all these years. I have planted certain values in my public service that I have not strayed from. I've worked tirelessly with local communities to realize their dreams and their goals of economic development, investment, and job creation, to support the principles of a faith-based community. And the values that guide me in this purpose have drawn me to commitments to support our social compact with our senior citizens, with our veterans, with the people of this great Northland who live here because they love and cherish this land. I want to be sure that everyone has the opportunity to grow up and enjoy the benefits of greater Minnesota and a quality of life that is unmatched anywhere else in this world. And I, too, appeal for your support again, as I've done in the past, ask for your continued confidence to serve you to the best of my ability, to the best of your needs and your goals and your dreams and your values.
Thank you. And in closing, I'd like to thank our sponsors, ICC, Itasca Community College, my co-moderator, Bill Hanna, and thank you very much,
Thank you,
Congressman Oberstar and Mr. Cravaack. And most of all, I want to thank you, the audience, for patience, listening, and I will just remind you that we will be able to go to the www.debateminnesota.org for information about broadcast and rebroadcast. With that, let's applaud.